How did social media influence your transition?
Well, honestly, I didn't even know that transition from female to male was an option until I was on social media and began being exposed to those type of communities. And it just really appealed to me as a scared, traumatized, girl going through puberty, precocious puberty, and I just clung to that idea.
What platform was the first platform you saw it on?
Instagram, but I think a lot of content trickled over from Tumblr and was reposted there.
Did the algorithm eventually start feeding you this stuff in your For You pages and things like that, where you would immediately see it, even if you didn't follow the accounts?
But I do think the algorithm was definitely geared toward and would recommend more accounts and stuff like that.
They were pushing the idea of transitioning?
Right, a lot of LGBT pages and stuff like that. It's definitely alluring, the idea of, a super accepting, loving community.
How accepting and loving have they been since you detransitioned?
Honestly, if anything, I feel like I've been hushed. I've been told I'm going to hurt trans people by speaking about my experience, and that I'm taking their rights away.
So they want to erase you. That's what would make them happy.
Essentially.
If you watch the news, you've probably heard politicians and pundits saying things like this.
Transgender children are not having surgeries. That's really important to say.
In his tweet, he talked about stopping surgeries for people under 18, which is not a thing. That is not a thing that happens.
There is misinformation presented that somehow that we're doing surgery on minors or even children, and that simply is not true.
So Layla Jane, how old were you when they gave you a double mastectomy?
It was a month after my 13th birthday.
How long was the process before that with the doctors to prepare you for this?
I initially started seeing doctors for my gender dysphoria when I was 12. So it was within that time frame, within a year.
What age were you when they put you on puberty blockers?
I was 12 years old.
12 years old, doctors gave you a drug called Lupron. This drug has been used to chemically castrate sex offenders, pedophiles in prison, but they prescribed it to you to stop your hormones. Is that correct?
Correct. At 12 years old.
Do you believe that you were given informed consent about the risks of puberty blockers?
I don't think so. I think, it was spoken of very lightly. They really did say it. It's just a pause. There were some slight concerns about my bone development, but, they just told me to take some vitamin D.
That's it. That's the only thing they were concerned about while giving you a chemical castration drug that they give to pedophiles that isn't actually designed or made to stop your puberty. It's not even approved for that. They're just playing, doctor. They're doing science experiments on little kids. At that age, you were still very much a kid, right?
Right. I was really naive. I didn't have an understanding of the world. I wasn't even in high school yet.
It'll never leave my mind how Layla looked when she walked in the room with us. She was a damaged young girl. Her anxiety was palpable. Before she ever said a word, my heart sank as I wondered how a doctor could ever operate on such a vulnerable child. They took an oath to do no harm. How? And then it hit me. We have a daughter older than Layla was when the doctors did this to her.
The other side says to listen to trans people. Well, Layla did identify as trans.
And when you were experiencing the gender dysphoric feelings, was there any inquiry as to what that root cause might be? Or was there just, seemingly this shift laser focused on the gender transition?
Definitely. There was definitely a shift. And they really kind of ignored my comorbid mental health issues like anxiety and whatnot. I remember one of my doctors said that if I transition, my anxiety and my mental health would get better.
Did the doctors warn you at all about potential side effects from a double mastectomy, like seriously warn you about the long-term consequences of a dangerous surgery like that?
Really, the main thing was they told me, and this is what the words they used, they told me I wouldn't be able to chest feed. I might have some slight cosmetic, they called it dog ears, is like the term. I think it's like when the scars sag. But that's really all they warned me about. Like, when I was in the healing phase, the first year or so, the nerves kept reconnecting over my scar tissue, and it was just excruciating.
And were any of those regressive gender stereotypes used as a, factor of, oh, you might like this color or this clothing, so therefore you should, transition.
I was a bit tomboyish as a kid. Like, I used to love Hot Wheels, and I used to follow my dad around the garage and stuff like that. I wasn't big on dolls, and I definitely was like, you know what, makes sense. I kind of latched onto that as more proof that I was trans.
Can you speak a little bit to your experience and how that pressure affected your body image, your self-perception, and your idea of what it means to be a woman?
Yeah, I mean, around the time I fell into all this, like, now it's like in to be like curvy and whatnot, but back then it was the thigh gap, and I didn't have that build, and
Were there some, like body issues as far as like eating disorders or anything that played a role that maybe then turned into that more gender dysphoric symptomology?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely had some issues with, my relationship with food and my body and whatnot that just went completely unresolved. And they got really bad after I had top surgery, and I need something else, I guess, for my brain to focus all the negative energy on myself.
Is there a difference between somebody who's anorexic or bulimic going to a doctor and requesting liposuction, and a child going to a doctor and requesting to have their healthy body parts chopped off?
Lately I'm having a harder time seeing the difference, especially if they would have gave me liposuction, I would have done it.
That's very important you said that. Admitting that you would have gotten liposuction if they would have allowed it, that tells us that you couldn't have possibly consented to anything else. Do you feel like you had informed consent?
No, I mean, even the way they watered down their wording and just called it top surgery instead of a double mastectomy. And there's just a lot of information that I didn't know about, like my own anatomy. Because mind you, I was so young, I hadn't taken a sex ed class. I hadn't even seen like diagrams. I think the biggest thing that they left out that I still deal with sometimes is the nerve damage on my scars and my chest. They told me I might lose sensation, but I was expecting numbness. I wasn't expecting like the electrifying jolts and just itchy sensation that I can't scratch.
What were some of the effects of testosterone in your female body?
Increased permanent body hair. My voice is deepened. I don't know if you can see it under the lighting, but I have a slight Adam's apple.
Is it your hope that those things will go away?
I've just kind of accepted that some of these things I have to live with. This Adam's apple is always going to be here unless I get it shaved down surgically. I have increased bodily hair and a little bit of facial hair that continues to grow. I was under the impression that would stop if I stopped taking testosterone, and it didn't.
That's another thing they didn't inform you about.
Correct.
Who paid for all of these medical interventions? Was it insurance? Were there private groups? Or
it was covered by Kaiser.
Everything?
Yeah.
Now, does Kaiser cover your aftercare now that you've detransitioned?
No, not really.
Layla's case is heartbreaking, not only because of what she was put through, but because she's not an anomaly. She's a drop of rain in a storm that's coming.